All right, so we are diving into this ABZeus Alfwet model thing, right?
Ah,
A philosophical framework, you say.
yeah, that's one way to think about it.
And it uses symbols like to break down how we understand the world. Okay, color me intrigued, but also a little terrified.
It's definitely a mind bender, but I think you'll find it fascinating.
Well, I'm always up for a good mind bending, so let's do this.
Okay, so at its core, the ABZeus Alfwet model is about understanding the relationship between language and reality.
Language and reality.
Yeah, like how the words we use shape the way we see the world.
Okay, that's a pretty big concept.
It is, but it's also something we encounter every day. Just maybe not on a conscious level.
Give me an example.
Sure, like think about the word tree.
Tree, okay.
We all have a general idea of what a tree is, right?
Yeah, like a plant with a trunk and branches and leaves.
Exactly. But our individual understanding of tree is also shaped by our experiences.
Like if you grew up in a forest versus a desert, your idea of tree would be pretty different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the ABZeus Alfwet model tries to unpack those layers of meaning to get at the core relationship between the word tree and the actual physical thing.
So it's like we're trying to decode the matrix of language.
That's a great way to put it. The model essentially provides a framework for analyzing words and concepts, kind of like taking apart a machine to see how all the gears and springs work together.
Okay, I can see how that could be useful, but how do we actually do that? How do we take apart a word?
Well, the ABZeus Alfwet model starts with this idea that every object has a simplest, most basic form.
Like the most stripped down version of that thing?
Exactly. And that this basic form is always the result of an abstract thought or idea.
Okay, I think I'm following.
So let's take your example of a tree again.
Okay.
The simplest form of a tree might be something like a vertical line representing the trunk with some lines branching out at the top.
Right, like a child's drawing of a tree.
Exactly. And that simple drawing represents the core idea of tree. It's the essence of tree stripped of all the specific details of different species or individual trees.
So that simple drawing would be like the abstract tree, and then there's the actual physical trees out there in the world.
You got it. And the ABZeus Alfwet model visualizes this relationship using a dot and an asterisk.
A dot and an asterisk, really? This sounds like some kind of secret code.
It kind of is, but it's actually quite elegant.
Okay, so enlighten me. What do the dot and asterisk represent?
The dot represents the concrete object, the actual tree in this case, and the asterisk. That represents the abstract idea of tree, that simplified form we were talking about.
So the dot is like this microphone I'm holding, and the asterisk is like the concept of a microphone, the idea of it.
You got it. And what's interesting is that the ABZeus Alfwet model suggests there's always a certain distance between the dot and the asterisk, between the concrete object and the abstract idea.
Okay. And what does that distance represent?
That distance, my friend, represents thought itself.
Thought itself.
Yeah. It's the process of our minds bridging the gap between the tangible and the intangible.
So it's not just that this microphone exists. It's that our minds have created this whole abstract concept of microphone. And that act of creation is represented by the space between the dot and the asterisk.
Exactly. And that space is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's influenced by all sorts of subjective factors.
Subjective factors.
Our experiences, our cultures, our biases, all those things shape how we perceive and understand the world.
So we've got our dots and our asterisks, but the source material also mentioned something called the Trinity concept. What's that all about?
Ah, yes, the Trinity. That's where things get really interesting.
Right on me.
Okay, so the Trinity, it's like this,
Okay.
we've got this duality, right? The
Yeah.
dot and the asterisk, the concrete and the abstract.
Right.
But then there's this third element that ties it all together.
The Trinity.
Exactly. The ABZeus Alfwet model says that every definition, every word, has these three parts.
Okay, I'm following.
The subjective, which is your personal take on it, right?
Yeah?
Your individual experience of that thing.
Right, like my subjective experience of tree might be different from yours.
Exactly. Then you have the objective, which is like the cold, hard facts, the dictionary definition, if you will.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
But then there's this third part, this middle ground, and that's the substantive.
The substantive.
Yeah, it's like the essence of the thing that transcends individual interpretations.
So it's not just my experience or your experience, it's like the shared understanding of tree that we all kind of agree on.
Exactly. It's the common ground that allows us to communicate about trees, even if our personal experiences with them are totally different. Okay, that makes sense, but this is getting pretty deep. We're talking about like the fundamental building blocks of meaning here.
That's what makes this model so fascinating.
It really does.
It's not just a new way of looking at language, it's a new way of looking at reality itself.
Okay, now you're blowing my mind again, but how does this all actually play out in the real world? Like,
Yeah.
how can I use this Trinity concept to, I don't know, improve my communication skills or something?
Well, let's say you're having an argument with someone,
Okay, I can picture that.
and you're both feeling stuck in your own perspectives.
Happens all the time.
Right. You're each coming from your own subjective experience.
Yep.
But if you can tap into that substantive level, that shared understanding,
You might be able to find some common ground. Exactly. It's like you're both speaking the same language, even if you're using different dialects.
that's actually really helpful. I'm going to have to try that next time I'm in a heated debate.
It takes practice, but it can be a really powerful tool.
Okay, so we got this Trinity concept down, but what about this ABZeus alphabet I keep hearing about? How does that fit into all of this?
Ah, the alphabet. It's like taking this whole dot and asterisk thing to a whole other level.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but also a little intimidated.
It's not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay, good.
Basically, just like each object has this duality, each letter in the alphabet has its own inherent meaning.
Like a secret meaning beyond just the sound it makes.
Exactly. For example, the letter A isn't just the first letter of the alphabet.
Yeah.
In the ABZeus alphabet, it's also associated with beginnings, unity, the primal force of creation.
Whoa, hold on. Are you saying that every time I use the letter A, I'm unconsciously tapping into these deeper meanings?
In a way, yes. The ABZeus alphabet suggests that each letter carries its own symbolic weight, its own kind of energetic signature.
That's a pretty wild thought.
It is. And it gets even wilder when you start to see how these individual letters combine to form words and sentences. And that's just one example. Imagine applying this lens to all sorts of texts, from ancient scriptures to modern advertising slogans.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. So we've gone from dots and asterisks to the Trinity concept, and now we have this whole secret alphabet of hidden meanings. What's the takeaway here? What are we supposed to do with all of this information? I mean, it's a lot to process, but it's fascinating stuff.
It really is.
So, like, what's the practical application of all this? How does understanding the ABZeus alphabet actually change anything in my life? Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Every interaction you have, every piece of writing you read, it's all made up of these letters, right?
Right.
And according to the ABZeus Alfwet model, those letters are carrying more than just their surface level meaning.
They're like little vessels of hidden meaning.
Exactly. So by becoming aware of those hidden meanings, you can start to see the world in a whole new light.
Okay, I'm starting to see the potential here, but give me a concrete example. How could I use this in my everyday life?
Let's say you're, I don't know, writing an email,
Okay, yeah,
and you want to make sure your message is received in the way you intend.
right. That's always the goal.
So instead of just focusing on the words you're using, you could also think about the letters themselves.
Letters themselves, like what words start with what letters?
So the ABC's alphabet is kind of like that, but for written language.
Precisely. It's about tapping into those subtle, often subconscious effects of language.
Okay, this has been a wild ride, but I have to say, I'm really starting to see the world in a whole new light.
That's the beauty of the ABZeus Alfwet model. It opens up all these new avenues for exploration.
It really does. So to wrap things up, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember from this deep dive?
That's a tough one. But I think I'd say this.
Really?
Don't take language for granted. It's more powerful than you think, and by understanding its hidden depths, we can unlock a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
That's a pretty profound thought to end on, and I think it's a perfect note to leave our listeners with as they go out and start